My daughter is 7 years old, and she asked me not to tell her mother that she'd told me a secret. That's the first thing I remember clearly from that Tuesday. The way she gripped my sleeve like she thought someone might come through the wall and stop her. I've replayed that hallway 100 times since. I still hear her voice the exact same way. Quiet, careful, like she'd practiced it. Welcome to Dad's Pure Revenge. If you're new here, I tell these stories the way they happened. No dressing them up. Because I think people need to hear that doing the right thing quietly still works. If you're watching this from somewhere I've never been, drop it in the comments. I read every one. And if this story does what I think it's going to do to you, hit that subscribe button before we get going. It matters more than you'd think. My daughter's name is Ren. She's 7. She's got a gap where her front tooth used to be, and she collects rocks she thinks are special, which mostly means gray. Her mother, Denise, is my second wife. I married her 4 years ago, 2 years after Ren's biological mom passed from an aneurysm nobody saw coming. I thought I was giving Ren a mother again. I thought I was doing right by her. Ren is the kind of kid who saves half her cookie for the dog, even though we don't have a dog anymore. Last spring, she made get-well cards for 3 kids in her class who'd never even spoken 2 words to her, because she'd heard they were out sick. She used to leave little notes in my lunch bag. "Have a good day, Dad," spelled with the D backward, and I kept every single one in the glove box of my truck. I still have them. I'm not the kind of man who says things like this easily, but that kid is the best thing I've ever been part of making. I'm Grant Holloway, 44 years old. I run a small HVAC business out of Danbury, Connecticut. 6 guys and a truck, with my name stitched crooked on the door, because I hand-stitched it myself, one slow winter. I work long hours. That's my flaw. And I'll say it straight instead of dressing it up. I let Denise run the house because I told myself that was fair. That was partnership. And somewhere in there I stopped asking real questions about what happened inside those walls when I wasn't in them. I trusted the wrong kind of quiet. It was a Tuesday, March 3rd, and I was only home because it was Ren's birthday the following weekend, and I'd swung by during lunch to drop off a wrapped gift so it wouldn't be a rush job Saturday morning. 12:40 in the afternoon. I remember because I'd told my guys I'd be back by 1. Ren was sitting on the porch steps of our house on Larkspur Lane, knees pulled up, waiting for the bus that wasn't due for another 20 minutes. She liked to sit out there early. She said the porch was hers. I crouched down to hand her the gift bag, and that's when she reached out and pulled me by the collar. Close, like she needed to whisper it directly into my ear so the house itself couldn't hear. "Dad, can you ask Mom to stop putting things in my juice?" I laughed a little. At first, I actually laughed, because it sounded like something out of a kid's imagination, like the time she swore our neighbor's cat could talk. I asked her what she meant. She just shrugged and said her stomach hurt a lot, and that sometimes after her juice at night, she felt sleepy, not regular tired, and that Mom told her not to talk about it because it was vitamins, and grown-ups don't like being asked twice about vitamins. Something in my chest went cold and stayed there. I didn't go back to work that day. I called my foreman, Curtis Ames, told him to take the crew, and I'd catch up tomorrow, and I took Ren straight to St. Vincent's Urgent Care on Route 7. I told the intake nurse everything my daughter had told me, word for word, and I watched the nurse's face change the way a face changes when someone's heard this kind of thing before and knows exactly what box it needs to go in. They ran blood work. They ran a urine panel. The doctor, a woman named Dr. Patricia Kowalski, came back into the room 40 minutes later, holding a folder against her chest, like it weighed something. She didn't sit down right away. That's the detail I keep coming back to. She just stood there a second, like she was deciding how to say it to a father instead of to a chart. There were elevated levels of an over-the-counter antihistamine in Ren's system. The kind meant for allergies, the kind that makes grown adults drowsy in the wrong dose, let alone a 7-year-old, given regularly, given quietly, night after night, dressed up as something else. Dr. Kowalski didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. She said, "This isn't a one-time thing, Mr. Holloway. This has a pattern to it. And then she went quiet and let that sentence sit in the room by itself, because there wasn't anything gentler to wrap around it. I want to be honest with you about what that silence did to me. I've torn engines apart with my bare hands in July heat and never broken a sweat over it. I sat in that exam room chair and felt my hands shake for the first time since I buried my first wife. I texted Denise, told her we were at urgent care, that Ren wasn't feeling well. Her reply came back in 90 seconds. Probably just the flu going around. I have a client call. Can you handle it? That was it. No, is she okay? No, on my way. 90 seconds. And the whole reply fit in one line. Cold as the tile floor under my boots. I want to tell you about somebody else. Because this story isn't only about what Denise did. It's about what other people did instead. Ren's kindergarten teacher 2 years back, a woman named Louise Perry, had kept in touch with us even after Ren moved up a grade, mostly because Ren still wrote her letters in crayon. When I called Louise that night just to talk it through with somebody who knew my daughter, she didn't ask a single question before she said, "I'll come sit with her tomorrow morning before school so you can go handle whatever you need to handle." She showed up at 7:15 the next morning with a thermos of hot chocolate for Ren and a look on her face that told me she already understood this was serious. She had a habit, every time she left our porch, of turning back once and saying, "Call me if anything." She said it that morning. She said it every morning after that for 2 straight weeks. Free, unasked. Just because it was the right thing and she wasn't going to make me beg for it. I didn't confront Denise that first night. I want to be honest about that too. I sat with it. I watched her move through our kitchen the next morning, pouring Ren's juice like always, humming along to the radio like always. And some part of me was still hunting for a version of this where I was wrong, where there was an explanation that didn't make my stomach turn. I told myself I needed more before I said anything. I told myself I owed her that. Looking back, I think I was just scared of what it would mean about the last 4 years if I let myself believe it all at once. What turned it for me wasn't rage. It was smaller than that. It was watching Ren, 3 nights later, reach for her cup of juice on the counter, and then quietly, without a word, pour it down the drain when she thought nobody was looking. A 7-year-old, protecting herself from her own mother in her own kitchen, silent as a shadow. That's when the switch went. Not loud, just final. I started keeping a log. Every glass of juice Denise handed Ren, I noted the time. Every night Ren said her stomach hurt, or she felt sleepy. I wrote it down with the date beside it. I saved 3 days' worth of juice in mason jars in the garage fridge, behind the paint cans, where Denise never looked. Dr. Kowalski had told me, if I could bring in a sample, they could test it directly instead of just Ren's blood, so I did. The lab results came back on a Thursday, March 19th, 4:12 in the afternoon. I remember because I was standing in the St. Vincent's parking lot when the call came through, and I had to sit down on the curb. Same antihistamine, present in 2 out of the 3 jars, at a concentration the lab tech on the phone described, carefully, as well above anything you'd get from an accidental dose. Not once. A pattern. Documented now, in ink, with a lab's letterhead on it. Here's what I didn't expect. It wasn't a scheme I built. It wasn't some trap I laid. The truth just kept surfacing on its own, the way water finds a crack. Ren's school nurse, a woman named Carol Fenwick, mentioned almost in passing during a parent-teacher call that Ren had been sent to her office, sleepy, 3 separate times that semester, and Carol had actually written incident notes each time, thinking it might be worth mentioning eventually. Those notes existed before I ever asked for them. They'd been sitting in a file the whole time, waiting for someone to connect them to something. I brought everything to a family law attorney, a man named Preston Aldridge, whose office was 2 doors down from my old barbershop on Main. He looked over the lab results, the nurse's notes, Dr. Kowalski's written statement, and he was quiet for a moment before he said something I've never forgotten. "Mr. Holloway, you didn't build a case. You just finally looked at the one that was already there." I want to pause here, because I know some of you are waiting for the moment I confronted her, and it's coming, but I need you to understand the waiting first. Every day between that lab result and the day I actually sat Denise down, I watched the missed calls from her stack up on my phone while I was meeting with Preston or sitting with Ren at appointments I stopped explaining. 11 missed calls the first week, 29 by the second, 34, then 38. Each one a little more irritated in the voicemail tone, like she could sense something shifting under her feet but couldn't name it. She had no idea what I was building toward. She would. The confrontation happened on a Sunday evening, April 5th, at our kitchen table. The same table where she'd poured that juice 100 times. Ren was next door at Louise's for the night. I laid the folder down in front of Denise. The lab report, the nurse's notes, Dr. Kowalski's statement, the mason jar photos. She went white first, then she went cold. The way people do when they realize denial isn't going to work, but they try it anyway. It was just Benadryl, she said. Kids get antihistamines all the time. I told her the dosage on record wasn't a kid's dose, and it wasn't occasional, and a doctor with a license had already put that in writing. She said I was overreacting. She said I'd always been an overreacting man when it came to that girl. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I'm not here to argue with you, Denise, I said. I'm here to tell you what's already happened. There's a report at St. Vincent's. There's a report from the school nurse. There's a lab result with your name nowhere near it and my daughter's blood right there on the page. This isn't a conversation where you get to talk me out of something. It already happened. She didn't cry. I want to be honest about that too, because it would be easier to tell you she broke down and everything softened. She didn't. She sat very still, and then she said quietly, "You're going to ruin things over Benadryl," like the word itself could make it small again. I filed for divorce that same week, and I brought every document to the custody proceedings. The judge, a woman named the Honorable Rita Osei, didn't take long once the medical and school records were entered. Full custody went to me. Denise was ordered into a supervised visitation arrangement pending a psychological evaluation, and as far as I know, 8 months later, she still hasn't completed the terms required to move past supervised visits. That's not something I did to her. That's the shape of the consequence she built for herself. One quiet glass of juice at a time. I won't pretend this ends with a clean bow. Ren still asks sometimes out of nowhere, at dinner or in the car, whether her mom is doing better, whether she still lives at the old house on Larkspur Lane. I tell her the truth in pieces she can hold, that her mom made choices that hurt her, and that grown-ups have to earn trust back slowly, if they can earn it back at all. I don't know if Denise and Ren will ever have a real relationship again. Some nights that costs me more than I let on. I lost 4 years of believing I'd built a whole family, and I don't get those years back just because the truth came out. But I'll tell you what I have now. Ren pours her own juice these days, from a carton she keeps in the door of the fridge, with a little sticky note on it in her handwriting that just says, "Mine." She sleeps through the night. She doesn't say sleepy sleepy anymore. Last week she handed me a rock she found by the mailbox and told me it was extra special. And for the first time in a long while, I believed her completely. No second guessing. No watching for what I might have missed. If there's one thing I'd ask you to take from this,